Okay, we're recording. Good. So we're going to make a very quick summary out of it. We're going to read it, and basically we're going to see that it is not saying anything that we haven't seen with the other slides. So defining characteristics of adjectives. Okay, so morphological characteristics. An adjective can be inflected to show comparative and superlative degree. We know that. B, syntactic characteristics. Adjectives can be attributive and predicative syntactic roles. We know that, but also we also said that they can be postpositive. Okay, postpositive when we're dealing with when we are dealing with compound indefinite pronouns. Then third, semantic characteristics. They typically characterize the referent of a nominal expression. Well, that's true because they provide a feature, right? Nothing new. Many of the most common adjectives are called central adjectives. That is to say, they share all these characteristics. If the adjective does not share all of these characteristics, it is labeled as a peripheral adjective. Marque, peripheral adjective. An adjective which do not share three different characteristics. So for example, it can not be inflected in order to show comparison or superlative degrees on the one hand. On the other hand, they can be attributive and predicative. They, for example, can only be attributive or can only be predicative. And finally, the semantic feature, I don't like it that much. I think it is not that, because how, right, is semantics. It will depend on a ton of things. So I won't say much about semantics. I will go with the other two, right? So if the adjective, un segundo, chiquillos, por favor. Ok, hablando de qué hablaba de central adjectives y peripheral adjectives. Central adjectives tienen que tener todas las características y un peripheral, aunque si falta una, es peripheral. Eso. Okay, variability in the defining characteristics of adjectives. So in theory, the adjective big is a central adjective. Why? Because it has a morphological inflection, bigger, biggest, attributive role, big house, predicative role, it is big. Descriptive meaning, I won't say much about that, right? Let's forget about predictive meaning. Ungradable, can I say very big? Yes. So it is true. On the other hand, beautiful, it is not a central adjective, it's a peripheral adjective. Why? Well, because you cannot take, it can't take morphological inflections. You can't say beautifuler or beautifulest, right? You have to say more beautiful, most beautiful. Al tiro ahí, paréntesis, peripheral, comparison, peripheral, superlative, right? Periphrastic, perdón, periphrastic, periphrastic comparison, periphrastic superlative. They can be in attributive role, beautiful house, predicative, it is beautiful. We won't say much about descriptive. And can they be graded? Very beautiful. Yes, they can be graded. Let's go with absolute. Absolute is peripheral because you cannot take in morphological inflection. It's a long adjective. It can be in attributive, it can be in predicative. Let's forget about descriptive meaning, but in gradable, you can't say very absolute, right? Because the word itself is quite, it's absolute, right? So you can't say that. Eso. So what we have new over here is the idea of central adjective and peripheral adjective. And that's it. The formation of adjectives using, okay, we can form adjectives by using participial forms, by adding word ending or derivational suffixes, and by compounding. Participial adjectives. Both ing and ed participial forms can be used as adjectives. Amazing. It ends in ing. Amazing. That was amazing. ed. So I'm looking for an adjective ending in ed. Received information. The received information, the given information, by affixation, that is to say, adding a negative prefix to an already existing participial adjective. We can have some new ones. And given, I'm thinking about that. Both of them can be placed in attributive or predicative syntactic roles. However, participial adjectives are usually encountered within attributive context as premodifiers. So common ing participial adjectives: amazing, boring, corresponding, encouraging, exciting, existing, so on and so forth. With ed, advanced, lurched, armed, chained, bored, complicated, confused, so on and so forth. ¿Por qué participial adjectives? Well, because they come from verbs, right? Amaze, bore, correspond, encourage, excite, exist, follow, increase, interest, lead, miss, stand, outstand. He outstands this. I would say that was this. To promise, to remind, to threat. Right, that's why they are called participial adjectives, because of the participial forms, right? Two different participial forms: the present participle, that is to say ing, and the past participle, that is to say the ed. But in this case, they are not performing the role of a verb, but the role of an adjective. Adjectives with derivational affixes formed by adding as adjective suffix in typo as an adjective suffix to a noun or verb. So if I have the noun cord and then I have the suffix less, I can create an adjective, a derived adjective, cordless, so on and so forth. I won't say much. Adjectives can also be formed by adding a negative prefix in, non, sensitive, insensitive, standard, non-standard, believable, unbelievable. Adjectival compounding. These are made from a combination of more than one word. Okay, adjective, noun, adjective, adverb, ed participle, adverb, ing participle. Okay, the only ones I think are more interesting, okay, because the very first of them, adjective, and so on, it's basically the same idea. We can't say much about that, I think. But the reduplicative, wishy-washy, roly-poly, goody-goody, old-fashioned, I would say, old-fashioned. They have an issue with the sounds, right? Repeated sounds, roly-poly, right? I think there's an explanation for that. In some cases, the individual item in a compound can be derived from other words, like grayish from gray. Yeah, because in the very first example, we have grayish blue, right? These in compounds can be analyzed as two words if the hyphen was omitted. Highly sensitive. Is it over there in some place? I won't say, I will never. Okay, all this comes from the idea of lexeme that we have discussed so far. And if you remember that on the first term, when we were saying, okay, what's a word, right? So we have different definitions, and one of them is the orthographical definition, which says that a word is something written with a blank space at the beginning and at the very end with a space, right? With a separating space. Now, the question is, what happens if I see highly, where is it? Se movió esto. Sorry. Oh, se movió caleta. Wait. What happens if I see highly sensitive? As there's a space in the middle of them, highly and then sensitive, I would say that they are two different lexemes. Highly sensitive because we can have very sensitive. Now, in order to avoid that problem, what we have to do then is adding a hyphen in the middle of them, therefore erasing that blank space and replacing it by the presence of that symbol. With that idea in mind, what we have then is a normal, I would say standardized writing with no blank space in the middle, right? So that would be the idea. Interesting, adjectival compounds present a compact form of information. Often alternative expressions will require a full clause, usually a relative clause. Thus, an attack that was motivated by racism becomes a racially motivated attack. Consider the following example from a news text. In a speech before the ballot, Mr. Kovac, whose career includes a stint as an economic advisor to Cuban leader Fidel Castro in the 70s, said he was in favor of socially oriented market policies, right? I agree with the principles of a market economy which are socially oriented. So in that manner, you will see that the usage of compound adjectives is a way in which we can reduce the language we're using. Therefore, following the idea or the principle of the economy of language, we tend to say the very same, but with fewer words or fewer constructions. That's the idea. So a compound adjective is a reduced form of a clause. Interesting. One type of compound is more common in conversation, the reduplicative compound, wishy-washy, roly-poly. These compounds are different from the other compounds because the two parts rarely occur separately. They also usually play with sounds, which make them more suited to conversation, but I would say that they are quite old-fashioned. I've never met anyone using them. I've never seen anyone, any of them. So, as a summary, adjectives have certain typical characteristics in their form, meaning, and use. Central adjectives share all these characteristics, and peripheral adjectives vary in the extent to which they share the characteristics. Adjectives have two major functions, attributive and predicative. New adjectives can be formed in three ways: the use of participial forms, the use of derivational suffixes, and compounding. Adjectives in combination. Sometimes adjectives are used in combination for a particular semantic effect. Repeated comparative adjectives. They are used to denote an ever-increasing degree of the adjective. So if I say funnier and funnier is a way of saying increasingly funnier. So therefore, the third example, see the branches get smaller and smaller and smaller is increasingly smaller, right? So if we repeat the adjective, what we are doing in fact is stating its increase, right? Some adjectives make comparative with more rather than er. In this case, the structure repeats the more. So for example, if I say it got more and more popular, why? Well, because what we repeat is the adverb premodifier, right? More and more, not more popular and more popular, right? Intensifier, good and nice. These are adverbs, premodifiers. Adjectives are conjoined with the intensifier good or nice in order to intensify the meaning of the adjective. So good and sorry is the intensification of the meaning of sorry. Even though I said adverb, but as you can see, good is an adjective, right? But its position is used so as to state the idea of very, to intensify. Esta es una pregunta ñoñísima. Alguien podría decir, profe, sí, pero good and sorry es una expresión. Si es una expresión, es un puro lexema. ¿Saben que yo también se las compro? Yo también creo que podría pasar por un puro lexema, good and sorry. In contrast, similar sequences with an attributive position do not intensify the meaning of the second adjective. Rather, the first adjective retains its meaning. For example, there are many good and prosperous people here. Oh. Porque aquí no es good and prosperous como una expresión, sino que es good people and prosperous people. Therefore, you have to be very careful when you're stating that they are just one single lexeme. Interesting. More about attributive adjectives. Attributive adjectives usually modify common nouns, sabemos. Attributive adjectives can also modify proper place, sabemos, pues modifican nouns. Less commonly, they modify the name of a person, little Laura, the late. Ah, interesante, también se puede. Pero siguen siendo nouns, así que seguimos teniendo la razón. Attributive adjectives can also modify personal pronouns. Although these adjective personal pronoun combinations are generally rare, they do occur occasionally in conversation and fiction, especially in exclamations. Lucky, poor, and silly are the most common adjectives modifying personal pronouns, like, for example, like you, not like poor me, silly old him, Lally laughed. It's really weird when you're saying that. Like lucky you, I've heard that, but the other ones, I've never seen them. Okay, predicative adjectives. Subject, predicative, complement, a copular verb. Or when we're saying subject, predicative is un subject complement. They characterize the nominal expression. Sabemos todo eso. Ejemplo 1. She seems quite nice, really. She seems quite nice, really. Quite nice, right? That's the subject complement. That is right, right, subject complement. It would be easier, quicker, and cheaper. So easier, quicker, and cheaper is just one single adjective phrase, modifying it. The tendencies are not significant and get weaker when the data are, ya sea más difícil. Es materia de tercero porque está ese and dando vuelta. Entonces, the tendencies are not significant, ¿cierto? Entonces, lo que une es el predicate, are not significant. Con el otro predicate, get weaker when data are corrected. De hecho, ni siquiera when, es solo get weaker when data are corrected for guessing. Eso es todo materia de tercera, won't say much about that. Pero es, I think, simple coordination of predicates, I would say. Many of the most frequent predicative adjectives occur with a phrasal or clausal complement of their own, as yo lo vimos, complements. That is, they have a prepositional phrase, true infinitive clause, or that clause that complements their meaning. For example, phrasal complement, well, you're good at remembering numbers, and remembering numbers is the full prepositional phrase complement of good. Clausal complements, and then you have two infinitives, like you look good enough to eat, and I am sure that affinities between, and that's that, I'm sure that the warm affinities, es una that clause, pero sin el that que está omitido. Object predicatives. Object predicatives, que es lo mismo decir object complement, occur with complex transitive verbs, lo sabemos, si no, no podría estar ahí. Following the direct object, también lo sabemos, si no, no sería un object complement. Rather than characterizing the subject, they characterize the object. Obvio, si no, no se llamaría object complement. For example, direct objects are underlined and the object predicative is in bold. Todo eso ya lo vimos y lo sabemos, no hay nada más que decir. Other syntactic roles of adjectives. Adjectives as post modifiers, common after compound indefinite pronouns, también lo sabemos. Adjectives as noun phrases, in this role they can be modified by adverbs. Oh, está interesante. I think the contrast between the very rich and the very poor in this country is disgusting. Intentemos hacerla. Vamos a tomar. Vamos a copiar. Estamos trabajando para usted. Okay, let's do it. ¿Por qué no? Ahí está. I think the contrast between the very rich and the very poor in this country is disgusting. So I think that the contrast, ¿cierto? I think that the contrast between the very rich and the very poor in this country is disgusting. Eso es una cláusula. The contrast between the very rich and the very poor in this country is disgusting. The contrast. Y aquí hay, dígame.
¿Por qué no separó in this country como una sola frase?
Porque está, según yo, pegada dentro de esta. Podría estar afuera, ¿no? ¿La puedo mover? Espérame. I think that in this country, coma, the contrast, sí, tenéis razón. Entonces todo está aquí. Gracias. The contrast. Ya, aquí hay algo que no hemos visto. Between and. Eso es nuevo. No voy a hablar mucho de esto, pero solo les diré que uy, qué difícil. ¿Cómo lo explico? Esto es una subordinate, una close phrase, es una comparación. Déjame ver qué rayos es between, porque si es una preposición, la hacemos. Si es lo que yo creo que es, la explicación se va a volver súper difícil. Easy, creo que es una preposición. Entre. Preposition, excelente. Viste, era una prepositional phrase post modifier. Entonces, esto es una prepositional phrase post modifier de aquí a acá. Y, espera, noun phrase, chun, chun. Prepositional phrase, chun, chun. Y luego viene noun phrase complement, chun, chun. Y luego tengo ese and que mueve a eso y a eso. La explicación de esto está en materia de tercero. Ese and en materia de tercero. Así que tranqui. Lo que nos interesa a nosotros es the very rich. Como ustedes pueden ver, para poder explicar eso, tengo que decir que esta cosa de aquí es una that clause. I think this, object. Que adentro de esa that clause tengo esta noun phrase subject. Que the es un determiner, pre-modifier. Y que contrast es un noun head. Que luego viene esta prepositional phrase que parte con between y que es un post modifier y que adentro de ella tiene esta preposition between y esta noun phrase complement, the very rich and the very poor, y que adentro de ella, y esto es la materia de tercero, hay un and. Vamos a hacer lo más sencillo que podamos. Ese and, ¿qué rayos es un and? para que ya lo sepan. Coordinating conjunction. ¿Qué hace un and? Une, link, join, connect. Pero no cualquier cosa. Tienen que ser... Esta es la palabra técnica. Paratactic. ¿Qué significa paratactic? Equal. Equal, ¿en qué sentido? Form puede ser o puede ser function. Idealmente form and function. And como coordinating conjunction, los fanboys. For, ese de aquí no. Fan boys. Nor, but, or, yes. Y so son las coordinating conjunctions que unen paratactically, that is say equally in terms of form and function. Entonces no pueden unir cualquier cosa, tienen, las dos cosas que unen tienen que ser iguales. Si veo de ejemplo the very rich and the very poor, ¿qué es lo que está uniendo ese and? Dos cosas iguales. ¿Qué son esas dos cosas? Esas dos cosas son noun phrase complements. De la preposición between, ¿cierto? Between the very poor and the very rich. ¿Cachai? Que la pueden hasta dar vuelta porque funcionan igual. Y las dos están hechas de un determinant pre-modifier de un adverb pre-modifier y de una adjective head. Profe, ¿por qué dice que es un adjective head? ¿Cierto? Como head de una noun phrase complement. Porque cuando digo the rich, estoy ocupando rich como algo como un pronoun. ¿Cierto? Estoy haciendo referencia a un grupo, a una entidad, a través de una de sus cualidades. Oh, se nos va a apagar esta cosa, ¿por qué? ¿Queda claro? Es media larga la explicación. Lo que quiere decir con esto es que un adjective puede ser un head dentro de una noun phrase, siempre y cuando sea usado como un pronoun. Eso. Okay, these people may be the real working poor, the elderly, the very young, the unemployed, or the transient. The very same example. These people may be the real working poor, the real working poor, y poor es el adjective head de esa noun phrase. The elderly, lo mismo. The very young, the unemployed, or the transient, funciona igual. Adjectives as linking expressions, they sometimes serve to link clauses or sentences to one another. Adjectives in this role can also have modifiers. Ah, interesante, puedo ocupar una adjective phrase como una linking expression. Ahí está, still more important. Still more important, eso es una adjective phrase. Es una linking expression. Se llama adjunct. No vamos a caer en esa pelea tampoco. Adjunct, creo. Adjectives as free modifiers. Los 8 adjetivos que nosotros tenemos. Recuerden, language, you can describe a noun by using up to 8 different adjectives, and there is an order for that, like nationality, form, color, shape. 8. There are 8 of them. And then finally, adjectives as exclamations like great, good, excellent, and all the ones you might like as a teacher. Finally, this is the summary. Adjectives can have 2 different kinds of meaning. They can be descriptors or classifiers. We haven't talked about that because that's meaning. Adjectives are sometimes combined in interesting ways. Repetition of comparative adjectives show increasing intensity. Combination with good or nice intensifies the meaning. Attributive adjectives can occur mainly before common nouns, but they can also occur before proper nouns and personal pronouns. The frequency and use of attributive adjectives vary greatly between conversation and academic prose. Predicative adjectives can function as subject predicates, that is to say subject complements, or object predicatives, that is to say object complements. Conversation and academic prose tend to use different kinds of predicative adjectives. Only a few adjectives are common in both predicative and attributive positions. Adjectives have 5 syntactic roles in addition to their attributive and predicative roles. There's post modifier, we know that. Noun phrase head, we know that. Linking expression, I already explained that. Exclamation, and the usual free modifier. Estamos listos con los adjetivos. ¿Alguna pregunta? Se va a cortar en 6 minutos y voy a volver. Sí. ¿Alguna pregunta sobre adjectives?
Yo por mi parte no.
Perfecto. Perfectirijillo. Ya, entonces dejo. Voy a cortar y vamos a partir con adverbs, ¿ya? Son las 15:09. Démonos un break que voy a tomar agüita. De 5 minutitos. Volvamos a las 15:15, ¿vale? Te mando el link al tiro a las 15:15.
Ya.
Vale.
Bueno, profe.
Nos vemos a las 15:15.